Identifying a research problem is the biggest problem for any researcher. Formulating it is far more challenging. Well, a good research problem boils down to finding your niche and working on your areas of interest. A pertinent problem provides the much needed impetus and gravitas to your research. The problem that you wish to address could be a concern in your field. It could be a controversy where there is no consensus. It could be a condition you wish to improve. Or it could either be a difficulty that needs to be eliminated. So in this video, I'll discuss the concepts and the steps for identifying and articulating a research problem with clarity. Initially, let me give you a broad perspective and then zero in on the nitty-gritties using a practical example. Writing a good problem statement is just a 4-step strategy. It's like strategizing your game plan before you enter into the sports arena. The first stage is the stage of conceptualization, wherein you select your broad topic based on your area of interest and based on your specialization. And you will also consider the scope, the magnitude and the importance of the field. So finding your niche and your area of specialization is the first step, called the stage of conceptualization. The second stage is about finding or gathering background knowledge, wherein you read from generic to specific literature. You initially choose literature which is general, read comprehensively, and then make it narrow and focused. So the second stage is gathering background knowledge. And the third stage is rereading. As you read, you would have identified the gap in the literature. Related to that, you will reread literature which is more narrow and specific in order to justify your research gap. So stage 3 is rereading. Eventually, you will formulate your research problem and you will articulate your research problem. One problem which is quite pithy, a very concise statement. Your research questions could be a couple or it could be numerous, but a research problem should be only one problem. So you will just jot down your problem and then expand on that. Let me give you a practical example to drive home my point.
As I said, the first stage is the stage of conceptualization. In the stage of conceptualization, you need to ask yourself these following questions. Can it be enthusiastically pursued? And can you sustain that enthusiasm throughout those 4 years after choosing a particular area? And can you solve the problem within the time frame of 4 years? Is it feasible to solve the problem? And is the topic very novel? Is it original? Most importantly, you need to know if you have the grounding, if you have the expertise to solve that problem. Once you tick all these boxes, then you may move on to the next step. So you have to be absolutely confident that the stage of conceptualization meets with these parameters. Stage 2 is about gathering background knowledge. And how do you gather background knowledge? It could be based on your day-to-day experiences. So your experiences could be a catalyst, or it could be based on everyday observations, or you may gather the background knowledge in discussion with research groups, because you have a lot of research groups, online research groups like ResearchGate, Academia, Mendeley. Find out groups which are related to your research interests. See what they are doing, and is their gap similar to yours. So you may gather background knowledge by following what your research groups are doing. You could also gather background knowledge by reviewing recent literature from high impact factor journals, from leading journals in your domain. This is by far the best approach to gather background knowledge. Or you may even read government reports if it's applicable to your domain or if you have access to it. Or you may have discussion with experts, with leading professors in that area whom you have access to. And usually it's a synthesis of all the above. So after gathering the background knowledge, you will make a list of possible areas. So you will just list down, these are the possible areas that I can explore. And you will identify your problem or the gap. You will identify the gap in literature from which your problem will arise. So this is stage 2 for identifying the research problem. That's gathering background knowledge. So in stage 3, you will reread after identifying the gap, and after listing out all the possible areas, you will start studying narrow. You choose one particular area and you will dig deeper into it, and you will dig deeper into those unresolved problems. So at this stage, you will not be thinking about solutions. You will only find out the unresolved problem in your area. And you can just gather that expertise only after rereading focused literature. And ultimately, after justifying all these parameters, you will go on to the 4th stage. Eventually, you will formulate your research problem. So let's look at this example. This is an actual problem here. And this problem is in the context of teaching writing. So the researcher has articulated a problem. There has been debates and controversies regarding pedagogical strategies for fostering writing skills. So this particular researcher is working on writing skills. So the problem is very clearly articulated here. Secondly, you need to justify that it is a worthy problem. And how do you justify? By giving evidences of what people have done earlier. So look at the justification here. Previous empirical studies have suggested that the current teaching practices in L2 writing classroom do not lead to the desired outcomes. Rod Ellis. So judicious mix of technology and pedagogy is necessary in today's context. So the problem is justified with reference to earlier work. So your stage 2 should be justification of the problem. And then you will talk about the deficiency with proof, with further proof. Because you will see that there is a paucity of research, there is a dearth of research in this area. So see the sentence structure here. However, very little attention has been paid to achieving learning outcomes in an L2 writing classroom using learning management systems. To the researcher's knowledge, there are only 2 previous studies concerning this issue. So the researcher justifies that there is really a dearth of studies in this particular area. And he goes on to justify that there are no studies which are conducted at tertiary level. Therefore, this research was aimed at investigating how students can improve their writing skill. So your formulation should have these 3 benchmarks. Clearly articulate what is your actual problem, justify the problem with proof, and talk more about the deficiency with further proof. So if you do all these, carry out all these 3 steps, then your research problem is very clearly articulated. So just remember, you may use this worksheet to implement the 3-step process. Take your research area write down what is the actual problem in your area, and then justify your problem based on proof. Show some samples from the literature and further expand that by talking about the deficiencies with further proof, and justify that this study merits further investigation. So these are the 3 simple steps that you need to follow during the process of formulating the problem. But overall, there are just 4 steps. To just briefly recap, stage 1 is a stage of conceptualization. Stage 2 is gathering background information, and stage 3 is reading, or rather rereading specific literature, and stage 4 is formulating it. So I hope this video on the 4 strategies of formulating a research problem would have been helpful to you.